Imagine just for a second, waking up tomorrow morning and realizing the entire kingdom is yours. Every palace, every soldier, every piece of gold, it is all yours. Now, most people would cling to that kind of absolute power for dear life, right? But one prince actually walked away from it all. Right in the middle of the night, he left behind unimaginable wealth, a loving family, and a throne that literally millions would have killed to possess. He wasn't running away, though. He was searching for something that all the gold in the world could never buy.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the incredible true story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would eventually become the Buddha. It's been over 2.5 millennia, and we are still talking about the radical choice he made. So let's jump right in and trace this wild cinematic journey from crafted luxury to universal truth. Which brings us to the first chapter of his life, the Golden Prison. Our story kicks off around the 6th century BCE in the small kingdom of Kapilavastu. A prince is born into the royal Shakya family to King Suddhodana. And from the literal second he took his first breath, Siddhartha's life was completely wrapped in mind-blowing royal splendor. But there was a catch. His life was also shadowed by a pretty intense destiny. See, according to ancient traditions, these wise sages visited the newborn prince and dropped an absolute bombshell of a prediction. They said he was destined for one of two paths. He'd either become the greatest king the world had ever seen, or he'd become one of the greatest spiritual teachers in human history. Now his dad, the king, thrilled about option A, but option B terrified him. He wanted a son to rule, to conquer, to carry on the bloodline, not some guy wandering the earth in robes teaching people. So, to make absolutely sure that spiritual prophecy never came true, the king did something extreme. He built a literal crafted paradise. And I mean a place where no aging, no illness, and definitely no death was allowed inside. He made sure his son never saw a single moment of suffering. We're talking the finest musicians playing all day, stunning gardens as far as the eye could see, and instant gratification for literally anything Siddhartha wanted. No pain, no sadness. The king figured, hey, if the kid never sees suffering, he'll never question the outside world. And you know what? For years, this claustrophobic golden prison worked like a charm. But as you can probably guess, you can't hide reality forever. That brings us to the illusion shatters. Because as Siddhartha grew up, his natural curiosity started chipping away at all of that comfort. He started asking those dangerous questions nobody in the palace wanted to answer. Like, what is actually out there beyond these giant walls? Why can't I ever leave? Finally, the king caves and let him take a chariot ride through the city. Now, before the prince even ruled out, servants were frantically sweeping the streets, literally hiding anyone who looked sick or old. The whole city was a giant movie set, staged to look flawless. But life slips through the cracks, doesn't it? Right in the middle of these perfect streets, Siddhartha spots an old man, back bent, hair white, hand shaking. Completely confused, the prince asks his driver what's wrong with the guy, only to be told, well, he just got old. Siddhartha was stunned. He asked, wait, will this happen to everyone? The answer was yes. Boom, for the very first time it hit him that youth doesn't last forever. And this opened the floodgates for a devastating series of encounters that we now call the four sights. First, the old man, representing decay. A few days later, he sees a severely sick man struggling on the ground. Illness. Then a funeral procession with people weeping over a body, his very first real encounter with death. He realizes, wow, everyone I love, even me, we're all gonna die. But it was the fourth sight that really flipped his world upside down. A wandering monk. This guy owned basically nothing, but he radiated this intense, fearless peace. Siddhartha was hooked. How on earth could a guy with zero possessions be happier than a prince who had literally everything? That question just gnawed at him, pushing us into the Great Departure. Years went by. Siddhartha married Princess Yasodhara. They had a beautiful baby boy, Rahula. On paper, his life was 100% flawless. But deep down, the perfect palace world had shattered. It was just a fragile illusion now, and those big existential questions were only getting louder. Late one night, it all just reached a boiling point. Siddhartha is walking quietly through the palace, and he stops right outside the door where his wife and newborn son are fast asleep. He desperately wants to go in and hold his kid one last time, but he knows if he walks in that room, he's never leaving. So silently, he turns away. He gets on his white horse, rides out into the pitch black, and at the edge of his kingdom, he chops off his royal hair, hands over his jewels, and just walks away into the night. Just like that, In a single night, a prince disappeared, and a seeker was born.
A seeker was born, sparking the next phase, finding the middle way. For the next several years, Siddhartha goes all in on his search in the dense forests of northern India. He studies under gurus, does intense meditation, and fasts until he's dangerously thin, surviving on practically a grain of rice a day. His discipline was absolutely unreal. But here's the crazy part. Despite all this brutal, self-inflicted suffering, he still wasn't getting any answers.
Sitting by a river one day, it suddenly clicks. He looks at his journey so far. He lived in extreme luxury in that golden palace, didn't bring him peace. Then he tried the exact opposite, extreme deprivation, literally starving in the dirt, and that didn't bring him peace either. He realized both of these extremes were just different sides of the same coin. They were both just forms of attachment.
This was a massive, game-changing breakthrough. He figured out there had to be a different route, a balance. He called it the middle way, a path of moderation that sits perfectly between sensual indulgence on one side and self-torture on the other. By finding this balance, Siddhartha finally had a clear map forward.
Armed with this fresh perspective, we arrive at the Great Awakening. Siddhartha sits down cross-legged under a massive Bodhi tree, and he makes this hardcore, unbreakable vow. I am not moving from this spot until I figure this out. And he meant it. Hour after hour, day after day, he just sits there, diving deep into meditation.
The ancient texts describe him battling his deepest fears, wild temptations, and massive inner doubts while sitting under that tree. And then, finally, right before sunrise, everything culminates in this radiant moment of clarity. He got it. He finally understood the true nature of suffering, why it's here, and exactly how to dismantle it. In that one cosmic moment, Prince Siddhartha was gone. He had transformed into the Buddha, which literally translates to the awakened one. But wait, the story doesn't end sitting under a tree. This kicks off our final chapter, a timeless legacy. The Buddha spent the next 45 years of his life just walking, village to village, all across India. He taught literally everyone, from kings to simple farmers, merchants, kids, and the wildest part, he never once asked anyone to worship him. His message was just so brilliantly simple. He told people, look, suffering is part of the deal of being alive, but it doesn't have to run your life. He anchored all his teachings on 4 pillars: compassion, wisdom, mindfulness, and kindness. And instead of saying, just believe me because I said so, he pushed people to question everything. He wanted them to observe their own minds and discover the truth through their own direct experience.
And man, did that direct message resonate. Thousands started following him, which turned into millions. To put this in perspective, today, an estimated 500 million people, over 500 million of us on this planet, follow traditions inspired by him. His ideas spread like wildfire from India to Sri Lanka, China, Japan, Thailand, and eventually made their way into basically every corner of the world.
You know, history usually hypes up the people who build giant empires, win bloody wars, and hold absolute power. But the beautiful irony of this whole story is that the kingdom Siddhartha was supposed to rule, it vanished. The palaces turned to dust, the kings were totally forgotten by history. But the guy who gave away a crown, the one who chose to conquer his own mind instead of neighboring nations, he built a legacy that has thrived for over 2.5 millennia.
It really proves that maybe the biggest victories aren't the ones won on a battlefield, but the ones won inside the human heart. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on. If one prince could walk away from literally everything to figure out the meaning of life, what truths might we discover if we just paused long enough to question our own?